This is Mac OS Ken.
A big quarter for Apple Watch, unpleasant iPhone surprises for some UK buyers, and behind the scenes with Apple Silicon. It is Monday, the 4th of December, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. Last quarter was the best September quarter so far for Apple Watch in terms of units shipped, so say the Watch Watchers at Counterpoint Research. While Apple's wearable commanded the same 45% share in Q3 as it did in the third quarter of 2022, shipments are said by the firm to have risen 7% for Apple Watch's best ever Q3 performance. The rise is particularly noteworthy according to Counterpoint, given that the latest Apple Watch was released slightly later than the previous year. The strong shipments of the second-generation SE model significantly contributed to the growth of the industry leader. Notable as that news was, Apple Watch was not the big star of the Counterpoint press release. That place was held by a couple of smartwatch makers, China's Huawei and India's Firebolt. On the former, the firm says Huawei witnessed an impressive 56% year-on-year increase in overall shipments for the quarter, thanks to the return of its smartphones and the bundled sales model induced by various sales channels. As for the latter, Counterpoint says Firebolt recorded its highest quarterly shipments to date, while India's top three smartwatch makers, Firebolt, Noise, and Boat, are experiencing a slower growth rate than before. The firm says this is indicative of a phase of stabilization in the Indian market, not weakening demand. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the smartwatch numbers, they show the wearables breaking with the current trend in personal electronics. Amid a global economic slowdown, says an analyst in the release, most consumer device markets like smartphones are still experiencing stagnation compared to a year ago. In contrast, the smartwatch market has recorded year-on-year growth for 2 consecutive quarters in both premium and budget segments. An unpleasant bit of craziness for some iPhone 15 Pro Max owners in the UK, and yes, before you ask, pleasant craziness can be a thing. But this is not that. According to a piece from Apple Insider, a lot of people ordering iPhone 15 Pro Max through the Apple Store online in the United Kingdom say they've received something else. Fakes in some cases, an iPhone 14 maybe, or even an iPhone SE. The report has iMore finding at least 88 commenters on Apple's community forum saying that this has happened to them. Most are people who click the Me Too button according to Apple Insider, though many have described their situation in detail. There's no way to assess what proportion of orders are being swapped out for the wrong phones, says Apple Insider. That said, it does have to be a relatively small number, right? I mean, compared to the number of phones ordered, it's problematic for a couple of reasons. First, finding whoever's switching the phones would be like finding a needle in a haystack. And second, how do you know there's actually a needle? The report says people this has happened to are reporting that Apple has been accusing them of attempting to defraud the company. The Apple Insider piece says courier companies are now suspected. That's companies, plural. As for the folks who say they've been hosed, Apple Insider says persistence and documentation have led to Apple actually replacing the first deliveries with iPhone 15 Pro Max units in at least a couple of cases. Apple's AirTag is getting another vote of confidence from police in the nation's capital. Just a month after Washington, D.C. police gave out Apple's device tracker to fight car theft, a piece from 9 to 5 Mac says cops are encouraging people to pick up Apple's $29 AirTag to protect their $1,000 jackets. Citing a report from DC area news outlet Fox 5, the piece says Canada Goose jackets have become a popular target for thieves in Washington, D.C. as the weather outside gets colder. These ultra-high-end jackets are sometimes priced at over $1,000 and feature prominent Canada Goose patches that make them easy for thieves to spot. Personally, I say don't wear an easily identifiable $1,000 jacket, but cops say AirTags. DC Police Commander Sylvan Altieri tells the outlet, "I've seen people use them on toolkits, suitcases. I think that's probably the best thing you can do as far as if it gets taken, because it's a nice way to track it." In other news, I'm working on a joke about dystopia. I'm not sure how it'll go, but it will include the line, "Whichtopia? You mean dystopia right here?" More as it develops. Kind of a strange Apple services story from the Wall Street Journal. According to people said to know something about something, Apple and Paramount are in early stage discussions about offering a streaming services bundle. Quoting the Journal, the companies have talked about offering a combination of Paramount Plus and Apple TV Plus that would cost less than subscribing to both services separately, according to people familiar with the discussions. The thinking is that bundling the two services would make people less likely to cancel either one. There's reason to think it works with streaming services. Quoting the Journal again, Disney has been offering Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN a la carte, as well as part of a package, and has seen lower rates of subscriber defections from its bundle offering, according to subscriber measurement company Antenna. Apple also gets the value of a bundle. Apple TV Plus is part of Apple One bundles that also include Apple Music and Apple Arcade. Antenna says that has a much lower cancellation rate than standalone Apple TV Plus subscriptions. Now, I started by referring to this as a strange Apple services story. The only real strange part is Apple's alleged partner. Personally, I don't think a Paramount Plus is top tier. That said, they are strong internationally, and besides, just because the Journal's heard about talks between Apple and Paramount doesn't mean there aren't other talks ongoing. Or their sources could be wrong. Who knows? Want to see how the silicon is made? Cult of Mac says CNBC has posted a video talking with Apple execs and touring Apple's Silicon Lab. It doesn't contain news exactly, but it really is interesting. Names you know or may know include John Turnus, Johnny Cerrugi, Kyan Drance, and Creative Strategies Principal Analyst Ben Beharan. It's just over 17 minutes long. If you're a chip nerd, a business nerd, an Apple nerd, or any combination of the three, it's worth the 17 minutes. You can find it on the CNBC site or on YouTube. Bummer news for a particularly popular video app for iPhone. 9to5Mac says it appears that the entire staff of Filmic has been laid off, casting serious doubts on the future of the application. Citing a report from Petapixel, the piece says Filmic was acquired by Italy-based app developer Bending Spoons in 2022. Bending Spoons was rumored to have gone through a round of layoffs last month, and those layoffs have been confirmed to Petapixel by sources close to the matter who asked to remain anonymous. Additionally, the piece says the LinkedIn profile of Neil Barham, Filmic's founder and former CEO, shows him having left the company last month. And perhaps the biggest nail in the coffin, 9to5Mac says there is currently no mention of Filmic or its apps found on the Bending Spoons website. Talking on Apple TV just got a bit more business-friendly. iLounge says the video conferencing app Zoom has turned up in the App Store for Apple's digital living room device. According to the report, the Zoom for Home TV listing has appeared in the App Store for Apple TV. Details state that the device has to be at least a second-generation Apple TV 4K or newer. The iPad or iPhone's continuity camera feature is needed for the app to work. And finally today, from the people who brought you the politically focused documentary Boy State, a politically focused documentary called Girl State. I'm not kidding. Apple TV Plus issued a press release late last week announcing the upcoming film. According to that, the documentary follows 500 teenage girls from across Missouri who gather for a week-long immersion in an elaborate laboratory of democracy where they build a government from the ground up, campaign for office, and form a Supreme Court to weigh the most divisive issues of the day. It was a winning formula last time. Boy State picked up a number of accolades, including a Primetime Emmy, 2 Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, the South by Southwest Film Festival Lewis Black Lone Star Award, the Sundance Film Festival Grand Jury Prize, and others. Politically speaking, there is plenty more where that came from. In Girl State, the release says, the country is now deeper into democratic crisis, with civil discourse and electoral politics increasingly fragile under ever more extreme political polarization. As questions of race and gender equality in a representational democracy reach a fever pitch, these young women confront the complicated paths women must navigate to build political power. Produced in part by Concordia Studio, the studio behind Apple's Michael J. Fox documentary, there is no word in the release on when Girl State will see release. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Cha.